am a neuroscientist, and I've been studying perception for, oh gosh, more than 20 years now. And I started studying multisensory flavor perception, and then I made specialty coffee as my main object of study back in 2017. So I'll be talking about expanding our concept of functional packaging. Right. So when we consider the sensory experience of a product, be it coffee or anything else, we have to take into account both the intrinsic and extrinsic sources of information about it, okay? So let's define those two concepts as we are going to use them throughout the talk, okay? Product intrinsic sources of information are those that are physically part of the product itself. So the product color, the product shape, the product aroma, taste, texture, sound, so when I break it, which sound it makes. So all of those things belong to the product itself, so are the sensory information of what we're going to eat, what we're going to consume, okay? But we also have the product extrinsic sources of information, and they are very important because the product is always, the thing that we're going to eat, they are always associated to something. They're not floating out of context, right? So it comes in a container, be it a cup or a bottle or a can or a bag, and it is associated to the location where it is consumed. It is association to the brand and other symbolic meanings attached to it. So all of those things we call product extrinsic sources of information. So they're somehow associated, somehow related to what is consumed, but they are not physically part of the product itself, okay? And I gave some examples of what product extrinsic sources of information are, right? Right, and when we think about quality, for the very definition of quality, we must take into account these two groups of information, okay? So the intrinsic and the extrinsic, because they interact. The brain cannot really process one group of information without taking account the other, okay? So related to coffee, the intrinsic attribute would be, for example, the flavor profile of that coffee. So the aroma, the tasting notes as the basic tastes, the flavor notes, the roast, color, etc. And the extrinsic attributes related to coffee would be any other information that is not really part of what we are going to consume. So we can talk about the origin, certification, and also sensory extrinsic information as the design. So when you think about coffee, those extrinsic attributes can be communicated, can be delivered to the consumer via a semantic way, so via text. So you just write down on your label information on origin, varietal, certifications, but you can also use design to communicate symbolic associations, and you can use design to communicate the flavor profile of the coffee, such as colors, the way of the bag, geometrical shapes that you put in there. So those things has been shown to be associated to certain taste notes or flavor notes, and we are going to see that in a bit. And also, the latest version of the Coffee Sensory and Cupping Handbook, we have a chapter devoted to the sensory experience of consuming coffee, okay? That's a bit beyond the technical sensory evaluation, okay? And this chapter discusses those so-called cross-modal effects, and we are going to talk about them a little bit. And one of the examples we have in the handbook is one of our early studies where we investigated the effect of the color of the cup on the perception of the coffee inside. Okay, so what is cross-modality? I think it's important first to define it. Okay. Cross-modality is the association or the pairing or the match between information coming from two distinct sensory modalities, okay? So let's suppose information coming from the visual system and information coming from the gustatory system or the olfactory system, okay? And this association happens when we are exposed to the same object or stimulus over and over and over and over. The brain will learn. There is a pattern there. And this learning means that next time we are exposed to this stimulus or object, we will be biased. We are going to have expectations towards it. So cross-modality is a crosstalk between the senses, basically. And the information coming from one sensory modality can actually change the way the brain will process information coming from the other sensory modality. So this change in expectation can actually change how we perceive things. So this is just an example about cross-modal association between color and taste. So this is a table from a review article that brought together 5 studies on how people associate color and taste. And they have examples of studies conducted in Western countries and Eastern countries with varied sample size, testing hypotheses, and they have reported a huge consistency on how people associate color and taste. So people tend to associate the sweet taste with red, orange, and pink colors, sour taste or acidic taste to yellow and green, salty to white, blue, and gray, and bitter to black, green, purple, and brown colors, okay? And this is very consistent across cultures, across decades. And colors are also associated to flavors, okay? So there are other studies showing that people also associate colors to certain tastes and to certain flavors, so the colors can actually prime people or put people in an anticipatory mode, in a expectation towards some taste notes or flavor notes. So this is basically how it happens. So cross-modal association can trigger expectations of sensations, and this is done via cross-modal bias, okay? And as I said, as we are exposed over and over and over to an object, the brain will detect any statistical regularity there, so a statistical pattern that two things tend to occur, okay? So when we are presented those two groups of fruits and vegetables there, and I ask you which group has a greater probability of being sweet, and which group has a greater probability of being sour or bitter. The majority of you will say that the red group will have a greater probability of being sweet. Why? Because you've been exposed to red fruits and vegetables, and you know that they tend to be sweeter than the green fruits and vegetables. So it's just an association that the brain does. It's simple like that. But it has a powerful effect on how we perceive things. So in addition to the color of the food itself, there's studies showing that the color of the package can also affect the perception of its contents. So this is a classic example. That's the 7-Up can example. So Louis Cheskin, back in the 50s and 60s, he added 15% more yellow to the 7-Up can. And this resulted in consumers rating the drink more lemony. And well, Cheskin was the person who turned margarine yellow. It used to be whitish and quite disgusting. So he had this idea, oh, so let's paint it yellow so people will accept it. And well, he did the same with 7-Up can. And he dubbed this effect sensation transfer. So what is happening is that we are transferring over the yellowish of the can to the drink itself. Yellow in this case representing or being associated to the lemony aroma or the lemony flavor, okay? And this is another example, that's the Coca-Cola can. So Coca-Cola released in 2011 the yellow can as part of the Polar Bear campaign. And it didn't work very well because soon after, consumers complained that Coca-Cola had changed its formula and didn't taste as good. So this is dangerous. So Coca-Cola, a month after releasing, had to withdraw its new white can from the market. So this was just a change in color of the packaging and had a massive effect on how people was perceiving the content or the drink inside it. Okay, so in 2017, already studying multisensory flavor perception, I decided to search for articles studying cross-modal effects in specialty coffee, and there were virtually none. So then we started to research it. We started with the coffee cups, then we move on to the coffee bags, environment of consumption of specialty coffee, and also information on the origin of coffee. So there are lots of articles, and I can send them all to you. Just give me your email. I can send them over, and you can read more about them. And we had already done some studies on the packaging label, the color and graphic elements of packaging label, the shape of the typeface. We did one study in which we only changed the shape of the typeface. And we saw an effect on how people perceived acidity in the expectation of acidity of the coffee inside this bag and actual perception of acidity of that coffee. And yeah, so in 2021, we started a collaboration with Coffee Science Foundation and Savor Brands to start a project to understand better the effect of packaging on the perception of specialty coffee. Well, packaging in itself is multisensory. So we have visual elements, we have tactile or haptics elements associated to it, and also auditory elements there. And we decided to start off as investigating the effect of color, because we know that color has a powerful effect on how people perceive flavors. And we have lots of studies showing that the wine label can really change the way people perceive certain flavor notes in wine. And given that coffee is more complex as a beverage than coffee is more complex than wine, so you have even more room for modulation there, okay? Right. So we did 2 studies. The first one was online, and it was more exploratory. So people could answer a survey online, and they were shown images of the packaging. I'm going to show them in a bit. And in this one, we could evaluate people's responses to 7 colors. So those online studies are very helpful when you want to explore something. So this is the information about the demographic data of the sample we had in study 1. So the participants were US-based specialty coffee consumers, okay? Our sample size, so 238 consumers. You have the gender distribution, the age distribution, and also data about their specialty coffee consumption, as the frequency of consumption of drip coffee, espresso, milk-based coffee, and non-specialty coffee. So you can see this over there. Right. So the stimuli that we used in this online study were those coffee bags, so the images of the coffee bags. So they represented bags of those 7 colors plus black and white, and we vary, okay, so 7 hues, better saying, and we also vary the saturation level. So we presented the same hue at 100% and 50% saturation level. Right, so the participant, we would be presented the image of this coffee bag, and they would be asked to rate their expectations towards the coffee inside that bag. So how, regarding intensity, they would expect the aroma of that coffee to be, the flavor, sweet, acidic, bitter, and body. So they would rate using a scale from 0 to 10. They are also liked how they would expect to like the coffee from inside that bag, expectations regarding the roast level of the coffee inside those bags. And we also ask them to tell us their association that they would see between the bag color and certain concepts, both utilitarian and symbolic, such as modern, sophisticated, organic, decaf, and also the association between certain colors, those colors that you have just seen, and certain flavor profiles that would be in a list. So they would check all that they think that would apply to be associated to what we are asking them to. So here you can also see the type of data we collected there. So we have continuous data for the scales and categorical data for the check all that apply. And you can also see the statistical analysis that we have conducted in this data. Right, so let's have a look at the results. So this is the multivariate analysis of variance analysis. And we can see that the pink color was associated to sweet. So people would expect the coffee from inside the pink bag to be sweeter. The coffee from inside the yellow bag to be more acidic than the other ones, and the coffee from inside the black and the brown bags to be more bitter than the other ones. Well, we were already expected that given what I've shown to you. Regarding olfaction and mouthfeel measures, we can see that for all of them, we have brown and black being associated to more intense, so more intense aroma, flavor, and body sensation. And we have the yellow and the pink being associated to less intense aroma, flavor, and body. We have the same pattern for roast level. So black and brown associated to darker roast, and yellow and pink associated to lighter roast. And regarding liking, we can see that compared to all the other colors, the coffee from the brown bag was the least expected to be liked. I would like the coffee from the brown bag. Right, regarding the effect of saturation, well, we can see that the high saturation bags were associated to higher aroma, higher bitterness, body, intensity of flavor, and roast level, and also to lower liking values, okay? So we had this saturation effect too over there. So higher saturation meaning more intense, okay, for all of those attributes there. Right, and when we run the principal component analysis, the results corroborated what we have had already seen in the analysis of variance, where we compare means. And what we see here is that the first dimension, yeah, the font is very, very small, but we can see that the first dimension actually explain the variance in 80.5%. So this dimension is very relevant to us. It's very informative to us. And we can see that the first dimension, so we have over there the plot with the colors of the bags, and in the circle we have the plot where the attributes are, okay? And we can see that the first dimension puts sweet, liking, and acidic together, and opposite to body, roast level, and bitter taste, okay? So we have this opposition there, okay? And regarding the colors, we can see that the dimension 1 also put the pink and the yellow together, opposite to the brown one. The correct way to visualize those plots is to overlap them. So try to get the black cross in the middle of the two and just overlap them, okay? And then we can see that the pink and the yellow are actually associated to sweet liking and acidity, and the brown is associated to body, roast level, and bitter taste, okay? Right, and regarding the association between the colors and the symbolic and utilitarian attributes that they were presented, we can see that the pink and yellow are together again, associated to modern. We can see that red and black are associated to commercial coffee, and we can see that the green color is associated to organic. Okay? We don't have a clear association of colors with sophistication and also decaf, okay? And we can see that the brown, the blue, and the orange colors were actually not associated to any of those attributes there. And regarding the flavor profile association, those are the flavor profiles that we presented For the consumers, so we have floral, citrus, berry, tropical, brown sugar, cocoa, herbal, spicy, and roasted nuts. And this is how they associated those profiles to the colors. So we can see that the brown and the black are associated to the brown notes, so cocoa, spice, roasted nuts, and brown sugar. We can see the yellow associated to citrus mainly, a little bit of tropical nearby. The green close to herbal and floral, and the pink between berry and floral tasting notes. So based on the results from study 1, so all the results showed that we have the pink and the yellow bag opposite to the brown bag regarding what people would expect from coffees that are inside these bags. So we selected the pink bag and the brown bag to go to actual tasting in study 2. Okay, so in study 2, people were actually presented with those coffee bags, so physical coffee bags, and they also performed tasting. So we served them a sample of coffee, brewed coffee, and they would taste those coffees and tell us how they perceive this coffee, okay? The data collection was conducted in September last year, and we tested specialty coffee consumers. It's a little bit with this configuration, but I think we can see. Okay, so the consumers, the inclusion criteria for this study is that they had to be amateurs, and they had to be consuming black coffee, filter drip coffee, or espresso coffee with no added sugar or milk for at least 1 year. So they would understand what is sweetness in coffee, bitterness in coffee, acidity in coffee, and flavor notes in coffee. So they would be able to actually assess it. So we tested 226 consumers overall, and we tested them in Rose Park in Long Beach in California, and we also tested them at Black and White Coffee Roasters in North Carolina. And here, again, we can see the gender distribution, the age distribution, and also the frequency of specialty coffee consumption of those consumers. Okay, so this is the overview of the stimuli that we used. So we can see the actual bags. So 2 hues, the brown and the pink. And we brought back the 2 saturation levels because we saw effect of saturation in study 1. So again, the 100% and the 50%, so the darker ones, the more vibrant ones, and the pale ones. And the coffee. So we served them a Ugandan coffee with notes of red fruits and brown sugar. Why we chose this coffee? Because this coffee belongs to the pink bag and also belongs to the brown bag. So we have red fruit notes, so pink notes, but we also have brown sugar notes, so the brown notes. So what we are trying to do here is to guide the experience of this consumer, modulate the way they're going to perceive the coffee by priming them with the color of the coffee bag, okay? So the color of the bag would put those consumers in an anticipatory state. What does it mean? Priming someone means that you are driving their attention towards something, okay? So it's a way to play with their selective attention to things. And when we pay attention to things, we process that better. And regarding taste and flavor and aroma, we can enhance certain flavor and taste notes there, okay? So when we pay attention, when something primes us and drives our attention towards certain flavor notes, and these flavor notes should be there, we cannot magic things up, okay? So that's why we chose a coffee with a profile that would match these two bags. So what we are doing is priming consumers, driving consumers' attention to certain flavor notes in coffee. And we wanted to see if those flavor notes or taste notes would be enhanced during perception, okay? Right. So this is an overview of the tasting session. So they started telling us their preferences in coffee, so how much they like those tasting notes, those flavor notes, aroma and flavor notes in coffee, as floral, berry, etc. Okay? Also using a scale from 0 to 10. After that, they would be served the first coffee sample. And this coffee sample was not associated to any bag. It was just a cup of coffee in front of them. And they were asked to rate their perception. First, how much they liked that coffee, using, again, a scale from 0 to 10. And then the intensity they perceived for aroma, sweet, acidic, bitter, body flavor, roast level. And then check all that apply for those taste notes. Again, the floral, berry, blah, blah, blah. If they would buy that coffee, so purchase intent, and if they answered yes, we would ask them how much would you pay for a 12 OZ bag of that coffee. It's called willingness to pay. And then we presented them bag one. And then we are going to ask them about expectations of a coffee that was inside that bag. So expectations of how much you would like a coffee from inside that bag, what's the intensity of aroma do you expect from a coffee inside that bag, so on and so forth. And then we would serve them the coffee from inside that bag. So we would bring a cup of coffee, they would drink this coffee, and they are going to tell us the perception. So how much you like this coffee, the intensity of aroma, sweet, repetition, repetition, repetition. Check all that apply for the main tasting notes. Would you buy this coffee? If yes, how much would you pay for it? We would do again with bag two. We could start with the brown bag and then move to the pink bag, or sometimes you start with the pink and then move on to the brown. So everything again, so expectations towards the brown bag, actual perception of coffee served in association to the brown bag, so the coffee from inside the brown bag. And finally, would ask them the importance of certain criteria when choosing which coffee to buy. Okay, so importance ranking of certain information in coffee bags. Right, so let's have a look at the results. This time we didn't notice a big effect of saturation. So we have the effect in expectation. So the low saturation associated with high acidity and the high saturation associated to higher roast level. But those things actually were not carried over to influence actual perception. And we have a strange effect of the low saturation bag being associated with a higher body coffee. Okay, so let's have a look at the effect of the color of the hue. Okay, so pink and brown colors. Again, we get the association between the pink color with the sweet taste, the brown color with the bitter taste, but this time the pink color was associated to acidic taste too, compared to the brown bag. But in study one, if we compare the pink the evaluation of the pink bag and the brown bag regarding acidity, we could see there that the pink was also higher than the expectation of acidity associated to a coffee from inside a brown bag, okay? So actually, we got the same results as we got from study 1. But what about perception? We only had the effect of the coffee from the sweet bag being actually perceived as sweeter than the control coffee. So the coffee that we served associated with no bag. So the same coffee associated to the pink bag was perceived as sweeter. And we didn't see an effect on perception of acidity, actual perception of acidity and bitterness of the coffees associated to the pink bag and the brown bag. Okay, now about aroma, flavor, body, and roast level. We had the same results as we did for study 1, the online study. So brown color associated to higher expectation of aroma, flavor, body, and roast level of the coffee inside. And this time we had lots of effect in perception too. So the coffee from the brown bag was perceived as having higher aroma, flavor, body, and roast level than the control coffee, and was perceived as having a higher body and roast level than the coffee from the pink bag. And the coffee from the pink bag was perceived as having higher intensity of flavor and body than the control coffee, okay? I didn't tell you, but those people are actually drinking the same coffee, okay? I think you got it, right. Okay, so when we have a look at the profile association from the check all that apply test, this is what we see. Oh, this is something that's important for me to explain to you before we come to this. We can see that the effect size of expectation is much higher than the effect size of actual perception, okay? The way the bars change. So when we compare the brown and the pink bars in expectation, they differ much more than when we compare those bars during the perception phase per se, okay? This is expected. So when we talk about expectation, we are talking about a mental imagery of something, okay? But when we talk about perception, we have a limit to where we can modulate what's actually being tasted, okay? So we have a limit. We cannot really make people hallucinate here. So there is a limit to where we can enhance a sweet note or a fruity note or an aroma or a body sensation, okay? So this is why the effect size in perception is expected to be smaller than the effect size in expectation, okay? Right, so let's see how people associated the coffee from the brown bag and the pink bag to flavor notes, aroma and flavor notes. So regarding expectations, we see that brown E, so that's the expectation of flavor notes of a coffee that was inside the brown bag when the brown bag was presented to them. And the opposite side of the plot, we can see the pink E, so these are the notes that were expected from a coffee from inside the pink bag, okay? So we can see the brown associated to spicy and somehow close to brown sugar, and pink close to tropical fruit, berry, and floral notes. But then we have the perception. So we can see that the flavor notes perceived in that coffee, they are much closer to the control coffee, okay? So we have a reduced effect size again. But even so, the dimension 1 that we can see in the bottom of the plot explains 87.88 of variance in our data. So dimension 1 actually separated the pink coffee from the brown coffee, also in perception. And this is a powerful effect that we have here, okay? And dimension 2 separated expectation from perception. As I said, we expect to have distinct effect size there. Right. So when we have a look at liking, when we compare means, so the analysis of variance, we don't really see differences in expectation of liking and perception, or how much people actually like those coffees when they tasted them. Right, but what if we looked at the liking data associated to what people prefer in the first place? Because we asked them that, right? We asked them to give us the liking, so which coffee profiles they prefer. And we did that. So those are the flavor profiles that we asked people how much they like in life. So which tasting notes they prefer in their coffees. And here they are. So those are the liking for each one of the flavor profiles. And we decided to bring to the cluster model the fruity notes, so we can see a higher acceptance for berry and also for brown sugar and cocoa coffees, okay? But we decided to also get the other two fruity profiles as the citrus and the tropical fruit. And we included the nutty as the brown note together with brown sugar and cocoa. So we put those, the liking values of these 6 profiles in the cluster model. So here we have the dendrogram that was the outcome of the cluster hierarchical analysis. And we decided to use those 3 clusters as a model to understand our liking data, okay? And so here it is. So we could define 3 clusters of consumers. Okay, the first cluster, so the first group of consumers, okay, they are grouped together because those are the people who like fruity coffees. And you can see the ratings for the berry, citrus, and tropical coffee. And those people dislike the brown notes coffee. And you can see actually their ratings for brown sugar, cocoa, and nutty coffees. And opposite, we have cluster 3, which are the people who do like the brown notes coffee. So you can see their ratings for brown sugar, cocoa, and nutty coffees. And they dislike fruity coffees. So you can see actually their ratings from 0 to 10 for berry, citrus, and tropical coffees. And we have cluster 2, which are the consumers who like both. They like the fruity coffee and they also like the brown note coffee. And you can see their ratings for those 2 groups of flavor profile there, right? So knowing that, now we can explain liking, okay? So when we put cluster membership into the analysis, we can see that people from cluster 1, so again, oops. Cluster 1 are the fruity people, cluster 3 are the brown notes people, and cluster 2 are the consumers who like both the fruity and the brown note coffee, the brown notes coffee. Okay, so for the pink bag, so the coffee from the pink bag, we can see that we have a higher expectation of liking from consumers belonging to cluster 1, people that like the fruity coffees, so higher than cluster number 3, which are the consumers from the brown notes. And we have the opposite from the brown bag. So the people who are expected to like the coffee from the brown bag are people that belong to cluster number 3, which are the consumers who actually prefer coffees with brown notes, and they dislike coffees with fruity notes, right? So let's see perception, so how much they actually liked the coffee served to them. We have an effect of the pink bag. So cluster 1, the fruity people, actually liked more the coffee when they taste the coffee coming from the pink bag than people from cluster 2, and near significance for cluster number 3, which is the brown notes people, okay? And we didn't have an effect of the brown bag here, okay? But the coffee from the pink bag was liked more by the consumers who like the fruity coffees, okay? And what about willingness to pay? So when we ask them how much would you pay for a 12 oz pack of this coffee, we can see that the pink bag was the color which added value there, okay? The brown bag, well, the price they were willing to pay for the coffee associated to the brown bag was virtually the same as the coffee not associated to any bag. But for the pink bag, we can see an increase in willingness to pay. And again, when we put in our model the cluster membership, what we see here is that overall, consumers from cluster 3, so the brown notes people, they're willing to pay less for the coffee than people who like the fruity coffees and people who like fruity and brown notes coffee. Yeah, this is something I'd like to discuss with you. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that. So we have our impression of those results, but I would love to hear yours too. And to finish, I would like to bring those insights on choice criteria too. So the last part of the survey, we asked them to rate, to rank in order of importance those criteria listed there when buying specialty coffee, when select which coffee to buy. So we have the table from study 1 and the table from study 2. In study 2, we didn't bring back all the criteria that we used in study 1 because it doesn't make sense. It would only make the survey far too long. But in study 1, we already have an insight that what is meaningful for the consumer in a coffee bag is information about the origin of the coffee, the roast level of that coffee, and the sensory descriptors associated to that coffee. And well, actually, those 3 things inform consumers about the flavor profile of the coffee. So the origin will inform me if I am more likely to drink a coffee with more floral notes or brown sugar notes. And roast level will inform consumers about which type of flavor notes they are likely to find in that coffee. And the descriptors, well, they actually are describing the flavor notes that are inside that coffee for the consumers. And then we have the other ones. And the least important for them in study 1 were packaging attractiveness and quality awards. In study 2, we brought back 5 concepts, And again, we can see roast level, descriptors, and bean origin, followed by brand and varietal, okay? And regarding varietal, lots of people actually asked us. So we, the experts, applying the test, so lots of consumers, and those are specialty coffee consumers, really, and they don't really understand what varietal is, point one, and how varietal will actually impact the flavor perception of the coffee in a bag. So how meaningful it is to them. So how much they should pay attention, or they should take into account information on varietal when selecting what coffee they're going to buy. Okay, so thank you so much to, well, everybody that took part in these studies, study 1 and 2. Thank you for the data collection team, the Savor Brands team, the Coffee Science Foundation team, the research team, lots of people involved in this. And thank you to all baristas and consumers who took part in this study too. That's it.